Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today for our talk on women celebrating water heritage through stories. My name is Pavinda and I work with the British Council, and we're hosting this talk today as part of South Asian Heritage Month, which exists to commemorate, mark and celebrate South Asian history and culture, as well as to celebrate and understand the diverse heritage that continues to link the UK and South Asia. Before I share more about our talk, I just want to say a huge thank you to South Asian Heritage Month and the National Heritage Fund UK, as well as my colleague Roshni Rao from the British Council India team, who has been instrumental in organising this. At the British Council, we have a number of programmes that address water. It's really a fascinating subject that reveals histories, climate concerns, geopolitics, and so much more. I work within the architecture, design and fashion team, and just within our team, I'm looking at a project called Future by Design, looking at the relationship between water in the UK and Ghana, as well as another project called Waterloop, which looks at the relationship around water sanitation and conservation in India. Really interesting topic. This talk is part of the British Council's Our Shared Cultural Heritage Programme, a multi-year youth-led programme looking at heritage within museums, and it celebrates water heritage across borders through the power of storytelling with women and young girls from the northeast of India and the UK as part of South Asian Heritage Month. And in this talk, all the women will explore, reflect and reimagine their roots, identity and the influence of intergenerational transfer of stories to create awareness on our shared waters and future. And now I'll introduce you to Sara Ahmed, our moderator for the next 1.5 hours. So I hope you stay with us because it's fascinating. And a lot of organization has gone into this. There might be a few internet issues. I'm just warning everyone now because we have young people from the northeast of India joining us. So we're really excited about this. So please stay with us and share comments and discuss things with them. So just a little bit about Sara. Sara's currently an adjunct professor at the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research in Pune and the founder of the Living Water Museum, a virtual repository curating visual narratives on India's water heritage. And she's also a grant recipient of one of the British Council's heritage grants from last year's South Asian Heritage Month programme. So this is a real nice legacy from last year, and we just want to share some of the learnings and the people we met along that journey. So now I'll pass it on to Sara, who will be moderating, and I'll see you at the end. Thank you so much for joining.
Great. So thank you very much, Parv, and to the British Council for hosting us this afternoon, evening, depending on which part of the world you're in. I'm Sara. I'm the founder of the Living Waters Museum, which is a virtual repository that we launched in 2017. We work with a number of young people across India to visualize and document water heritage. This includes the architecture, indigenous water architecture, for example, stepwells, or people have been documenting stories around springs and rivers. We have stories around intangible cultural practices on water. And before the pandemic, we were not just a virtual museum. We also engaged and we did a number of outreach programs with young kids and young people in Ahmedabad. We are a member of the Global Network of Water Museums that was also launched in 2017. It's headquartered in Italy, and it's recognized by UNESCO's Intergovernmental Hydrology Program as a special initiative towards Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water. So I'm really happy to be here this afternoon with a number of women who've worked with us. And it is my pleasure to introduce first Minket Lepcha, who we ran this grant with last year from the British Council. And Minket is a storyteller who is from the Eastern Himalayas and has been working around, using the medium of water, specifically flowing water and rivers, to connect women and their living heritage. And in 2015, Minket received the Young Green Filmmaker Prize for her film on the Teesta River. Before I hand over to Minket, I speak on behalf of everyone here this afternoon. Over the last few days, we've all been witnessing the rapid changes in Afghanistan, and we would very much like to dedicate this particular program to the young girls and the young women there, and to say to you that we hope that you will continue to find opportunities to express yourselves, to learn, and to reflect, and to build the networks of support and solidarity that are so important for you. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Minket, and Minket will tell you a little bit about the project that we did and introduce you to 3 of the young women from the Northeast who are going to be sharing their stories with us this afternoon as well. Minket.
Thank you so much, Sara, for giving this wonderful opportunity. And it's an honor and a to be a part of this beautiful women gathering and actually sharing this water heritage. So project was it is one of the most, I think, precious project that we have. Northeast repository of oral history and oral stories, and most communication in a form of art or a craft or rituals comes in a form of stories, just intertwined in different forms and ways. And I think women are one of the custodians for stories to be carried forward from a mother to child. And so when we were actually designing this project, we had around about 5 facilitators where we got together, and from different facets of life, right from the art to theater to even narrative of folklore, folk narrative, and we had fabric artists and different storytellers. We all kind of gathered to how we can bring about voices from the northern communities, and especially giving them a much needed platform about stories, especially which has always been ingrained in our community. So designed this almost like of 7 or 8 modules where all these girls from 30 girls were selected from different communities across Northeast, including Darjeeling, and they all were asked to actually reflect on themselves first, because I think most of the time when we talk about stories, we tell stories, but it's almost like reflecting back, right? We are kind of going through the process of not just telling the story, but living the story. So, but for that, we as people from different communities of North and Darjeeling have not got actually an opportunity to reflect on who we are, what are we about. And it is often told that we are from the Northeast, but we actually have not got time or even a space. And this particular project was about just understanding who are we all about, and also reflecting and then finding inspiration, local aspirations. We had beautiful singers like Taster. They have been singing a lot of this now, their Chakisong tribe, and they sing folk songs in different ways. And to have local aspirations was very important. So they got inspiration from different facilitators, and once they got empowered to do different aspects, how they can go, how they can express, then they actually went to their own communities and started documenting river folklore. And one of the reasons why we chose river folklore as one of the main medium and water heritage way of documenting was because I think most of these water heritage are not documented. And with COVID-19, when our elders were passing away at it's at a very fast rate, I felt like this is somewhere we need to connect the elders with the youngsters. And because there was this protocol from the government that we had, because everything was locked down, so most of the college students had to go back. So this was a perfect opportunity for them to reconnect with their elders and to kind of all the future custodians own oral repository. So 30 girls from different parts of Northeast and Darjeeling were actually selected. They went through this workshop, and finally we had 30 girls journey of their understanding. Some of them was a beginning, for some of them it was a nice way of connecting with the elders. So among these 30 girls, 14 artworks were we got really good 14 artworks, and that became the Living Waters Museum exhibition. And we also made a small ribbon how we went about it, and we never met. All these 30 girls we've not met, and some of the facilitators, it was all online. So we kind of created a report of how we can use this medium to even actually reach out to a lot of communities which are not reached. And I think this was a beautiful project where through the Living Waters Museum we got to connect to so many other communities. And with 14 artworks is what you see, and there's a report as well. And not take time, because I want these girls to get a voice and get a platform. So today we have three participants who participated with us. One of them is Linyam Byong from Arunachal Pradesh. We have Cholamu Lepcha from Sikkim, and we have Hamthoma Deburma from Tripura. So now I will just these three girls will be actually representing their stories that they had done as a documentation. And I think it's just not the stories, I would rather say expressions, because all of us as a women express in different ways, and we need to find that ownership of how what is the medium and how we need to express. So we celebrated that form of engagement, where we said allow yourself to figure out what is your best expression. So these varieties and intersectionality is what you see throughout the exhibition. The link is there as well. And so without further ado, I will invite Lenyam Byong from Arunachal Pradesh. She is a very young girl, a school student who participated with us and engaged with us. And she will be actually narrating a folk tale from her tribe. So, Lenyam Byong. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Hello, my name is Linyam Byong and today I will be sharing a folk tale from my mother's tribe called the Wanchar tribe from Arunachal Pradesh, and I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity since tribal folk tales don't often get to be shared to a wider audience. So I hope you enjoy today and get to learn something new. So today I'll be sharing the story of how water and fishes first came to the world. Once upon a time, there lived an old man and his son. One day, the old man and his son went to the forest and caught a bird. They hung it up on a bamboo and went to work in their clearings. When Rang's daughter saw this, she removed the bird and set it free. The next day, the boy caught the bird again, hung it up on the bamboo, and went away. But the girl came again and removed it. The boy told his father about what had happened, and so on the third day the old man came to help his son. The next, after hanging the bird on the bamboo, they hid behind some bushes, and now, when Rang's daughter came to steal, the father caught her and took her home. She was very beautiful, and he wanted to her to marry his son. At this time there was no water on earth, and people used the juice of the plantain tree instead. But when Rang's daughter used to bring fresh clean water to the house every day, the boy boasted to his friends of what his wife could do, and they wanted to know her secret. They followed her and saw how she went into the forest and fetched fresh water from a hole in the ground. After she had gone and left, they ran to the spot and dug all around the hole to make it bigger. Suddenly, water gushed out from the earth, and with it came many fishes, and this is how water and fishes first came to the world. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Linyam. This beauty was actually from her mother's tribe, Wanchar. Wancho. Her father is Mishing. And another part of it is it's beautifully hand drawn by herself. And along with the hand drawing, she actually did a cutout and she did an animation without any training from our side, just as tools that she could play with. And so this is purely her work and it's done so beautifully. And though we couldn't hear her voice very clearly, but this story you will be able to see in the link itself, in the Living Water Museum link that we have, or we can also share it. And now we have so this is her way of expressing her art, the way she draws. She has a private page also and an Instagram page, so she creates different animations and goes and expresses. And another beautiful girl, she was the youngest in our group. Actually, his name is Hamthoma de Burma. She comes from Tripura. And so it was very interesting because we often this whole idea of either through writing or either through speaking or either through drawing. But I think she said like she wanted to sing, and that was her best form of expression. So today, now she will give a slight introduction about herself and the youngest girl from our group. And she will also sing a song and explain a bit about the song. So over to you, Sara.
Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. So today I will be singing a song about the river Raima Saima, which is located in the Gomati district of the northeast state, Tripura. Um, I chose music to express this song because I personally feel that music connects, all the people with the universal language. And I hope all of you will enjoy the song. Manthok, 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 kumu polongi bahar. Luthok, luthok, malar, pothok, naima salang makokha. Oro no, bororo go, tui tongo, tui bishingo, raima shalama kokha. Manthok, 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 follow me bahar. My gorok moto, my chuk hingai, nuhon mani, nunggu ikhnai. Tui chang tilo, tui shir tatai, nuhon mani, ikhnai. Patong khado, Kuna toto, Raima shalama kokha. Manthok, 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 kumu polongi bahar. Luthok, luthok, malay, luthok, naima shalama kokha. The song is basically about the two sisters named Raima and Saima. Um, it is about the two sisters who used to dwell there. And in the second stanza of the song, it says that the younger sister calls her or invites her brother in law for having the meal. And, it describes the beautiful time they had together. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Ham, for this beautiful, melodious song and the voice that I can see you have been uploading lot of your music online. Beautiful, and I think her way of expressing herself and her voice is, I think, a much needed platform, and we are happy to be a part of this journey. And also the song talking about the Raima and Saima, this two sisters, and how the river of Tripura is related. It's about the rich heritage in the form of a song. And now I will call upon Cholamu Lepcha. She's from West Sikkim, and one unique thing that I liked about this her form of submission was that I also tell the story of River Tista, and I've been traveling talking about this River Tista song, but she decided to kind of submit this song in her own or lecture by normally. But this, so it's very important to hear what she says about why did she submit this particular narrative in a lecture language. So let's hear from her, and then we can also listen to her story in lecture, and then after that it's just an abridged version of the story in English. Over to you, Lepcha.
Kamri. Today I will be narrating the Lepcha's river folklore to explore the art of the storytelling in different languages and to bring in the focus that Lepcha has been identified as an endangered language. And I believe that through storytelling, we can revive back what everyone is slowly losing one's identity. So come join me in this divine journey. I present you. Tisatha itsasung. Mituk mituk nam nahansa ait sung. Mayelyang arika thambik thamchung. Pagap pudong. Punjok suryo. Tuksot. Kata purngan busa mayelyang. Ringyu ringit kyong nyet pusa. Ache bulen choshinan. Gun punjok zumchunan tong ham thoma. Ringyu kyong dik chain in ringit atombu. Hu liang korshong katop sum top ham thoma. Signim gat. Ringit philalim liang dong bril hamba. Ari punjok suryo, kung lo len chul, sazang bulyang ka ni te yong lina, top sakching ka tso mo. Liang kor shong sa sak zum sak partik bu, ringit nen huto sempende, rung rem, ari kung lo len chul, liang al apriyaw mat ka yong lina, tengpit achum kat mat ka o yong libi mo. Chukyer bengal ka pushok lin bulyang ka huni, zum ka o lina tut mat mo. Tu nahan liang uri ka kyosho, hidong pit teresa kye bu mulina ari nyen to mo. Hini kat nen, lon bu dong mo. Rung nen peril bu, in ringit nen tut fo. Rung peril bu yak bu lom ka, shibila nga mutsun ba non mo. Shen la tut fo yak bu non bu ringit. Kan lung sikliak non mo. Hudo lon bu lombar ka do, bakab dong bu, fil chul tik pa, tut sa cha pit non mo. Sa thai ringit pushok lin bulyang ka kyo. Hunan hudo sempente, ring am lem ka, agot hik bu, hudo len nahan kyeda bushi mo. Thi sa tha, ringit nen ring rembet mo. Hu de di kat hunna, de i kat de fam ba, ringit, hudo de di bun aplong, long ap tik rezong hun mo. Enteng petari migen ba, hu uk di mo. Sikliak lang hu, thul maya lang lovung rong, hudo sakru nan gunrem, amak sa bungka buso mo. Ari amak sa bunglom thor bu, den dong kung karonon bu, id buderum sa, chi fat mo, in ringit sa anuplom, lung thor o yong lina sa hutop mo. Utet ka, kuhom fulum belat mo, chi fut fu nan burem, kam thong mo. In utet ka, saksalion la, yang kam ter dit ba. Ringit hudo sa sakliak nan, gunrem amak sa bong katapyong sakching deng ba, rum kyu ulbu, chul hudo sempende. Rung liang, lalyak non mo. Hu along sơ ma fam olina, rung hudo sum punurem, hudo aplong de kon mo. Nyet buchul, liang asa priyo matlem. Ti sata itsasung is a Lepcha folklore, a love story of the two river spirits, Rungyu, the river Tista, and Rungit, the river Rungit, in the land of the Mayelyang, the home of the Lepchas. A tale of these two river spirits, which starts with a friendly race to go see what's below the rivers and the mountains that they have known. A race guided each by the bird and a reptile guide. Rungit, the male, unfortunately, loses the race to his lover Rungyu because of his careless bird guide. And this results in a heartbreak and a threat to the habitat of the Mayiliang. When Rungit, he flows back to the land, drowning and putting everyone in the mouth of death. But this tragic event is saved by the Idbudairum, the creator of the Mayaliang, who, in the form of a bird locally known as Kohomfo, the royal partridge, flies and lays its beak on the Mongchibib, a millet beverage offered by the survivors of the Great Deluge in the Tendong Hill. Then Ringit, coming back to his senses, realizes the outburst that he created and slowly flows back, going back to his lover Rungyu. And she comforts him with love and compassion and offers him to flow on top of her. And today we can see this spectacular scene of these two lovers in the West Bengal, the confluence of the river Tista and the river Rangit, where these two mighty rivers meet, Rangit flowing on top of the river Tista, and in the end, together flowing down the plains to see a new world. Thank you.
Thank you, Chulamu. Thank you so much for this wonderful story. Although most of you could not comprehend the language that she was speaking, but let me remind you, this is one of the endangered languages that she spoke, and this particular languages are spoken, or not just this particular, so many endangered languages we do not speak that language, and this young storytellers, young women coming forward and taking the ownership of these languages are something that these platforms actually help us grow. And it's just not the humans, it's just not the plants or the mountains which die, it's the stories die. And when these stories die, somehow or the other the communities die. And I think this is giving a platform for expressions which are often not encouraged as a woman, often not encouraged because you come from different communities which are marginalized across across the world. And I think these exhibitions kind of give a much needed encouragement and inspiration for people like us, where we want to reflect certain stories and aspects from Northeastern Bengal. Not to say that that we are the only community, but the fact that these communities have traditional knowledge, have indigenous wisdom, which can and talks about way of living harmoniously with different other beings. And all these three stories that was reflected to you talks about a certain kind of a fish, a certain kind of a tone, a certain kind of a plant, a certain mountain top which humanity. And because of these stories having been being a custodian for these environmental history for such a long time, it is much needed era, or time where stories needs to be encouraged, not just in documentation but a living history where we, like people like Chulamu, Liniam, or for that matter Hamthoma, so many girls. We had Sima Sandu, we had Jasmine, who actually did a cross stitch, one of the main posters for this event. So these are expressions where women are expressing in different ways. So this is like an alternative narrative that we need to create, because I think women can express beyond speaking and writing, and this is what we wanted to bring about in this exhibition. So we have also shared the link for the Remeeting the Roots link, and we would also like to thank all the facilitators, Arunachal, Chaya, Lilian, Kumtia, Amfu, and also Dr. Ripandi and Disto sisters, who all gathered together and had a solidarity to bring all these girls come forward. So this is what we have in this exhibition. And
Okay, so thank you so much, Minket, and all the beautiful girls, Limiam, Hamtoma, and Cholamu. You were all stunning, as you can see from the comments that are coming in. And I know that this project has meant so much to all of you, and we'll talk about some of that in the question answer part a bit later. But it is now my pleasure to move from Northeast India to the Highlands of Scotland and introduce our next speaker and our next storyteller, Gauri Raje. Gauri has a PhD in anthropology, but her practice and her medium of work is through stories. And we had the opportunity to work with Gauri when she was in Ahmedabad in 2019. We hosted a number of storytelling events with her around water heritage sites. And a number of these events were also with children with special needs. And it was amazing the way that Gauri was able to engage these kids and get them to spontaneously respond to her stories. So Gauri today is going to talk a little bit about her work with the British Council and around Glasgow. And over to you, Gauri.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that generous introduction. And it's always been a pleasure to work with the Living Waters Museum. And I'm so glad that there have been overlaps over the South Asia Heritage Month. Yes, I am a first-generation migrant to Scotland. So part of my work has been about bringing stories of where I live on the western coast of Scotland, and where I was born and lived in India, which is the western coast of India. Some of the linkages I found in this work of bringing these stories together were around water, notably around the fact that in Scotland, I live in a very water-rich environment. I live next to the sea. Moisture is in the air. It rains a lot here. And where I grew up and where I come from, where my ancestry comes from, is a water-scarce region. Gujarat, the foothills of the Deccan. There is concern around water. We look up at the skies in India to see when it's going to rain. And so it's been really interesting bringing together stories around water from these two regions. What I'm going to do at the moment is tell you a story. I'm bringing a story today to you from Scotland. It's a story about the relationship between humans and the creatures of the water, notably the seals, the salkies, as they are known in the story world and Scotland. There's something very special about it in the way that water mediates the relationship between us humans, who are predominantly land-based creatures, and the seals or the salkies that are water-based communities. The seals and salkies often are known to have abilities to move between water and land. And very often you find stories where the salkies marry humans and create communities together. There is a clan up in the north of Scotland that is known to have descended from the salkies. They are humans, but have descended from salkies. So I'm bringing you a story of known as the Seal Killer. It's a very well-known story from the north of Scotland, and it goes something like this. A long, long, long time ago, it is said, there was a man, and he made his living by killing seals. He was a seal killer, as his father had been, as his grandfather had been, as his great-grandfather had been, and many, many generations before. And as somebody who came from a family that specialized in hunting seals, he had a little bone knife that had been handed over to him by his great-grandfather to his grandfather to his father and finally to him. His father gave him one more object along with this bone knife, and this was a little silver whistle, a whistle that was amazing in the sound it made and called to seals, luring them to his traps. Now, one day, the seal killer was out on the beach. He wasn't particularly in hunting mode, but right there in front of him, behind a rock, he saw a huge, a gigantic bull seal. A bull seal was a rare, rare find indeed. And the seal killer, who always carried his bone knife about with him, he pulled out his bone knife, he crept as he had known, as his father had known, as his grandfather had known, silently up to this bull seal. And with one flash, he dug that bone knife deep into the seal's back. The seal reared up, it howled, and with one gigantic leap, it splashed back into the sea. The seal killer was dismayed. In one instant, he had not only lost a seal, a big bull seal at that, but he had also lost his father, his ancestral knife. And he was overcome with sadness. He moved back to his hut. He went back, and as soon as he went back to his hut, lightning rang through the air. It began to rain as it rains in Scotland. Thunder, lightning, big drops of rain falling on that earth, that moist earth. But the seal killer, he didn't notice all this cacophony outside, for the tears that fell from his face matched the tears that rained from the heavens. His connection with his ancestors seemed to be lost. And I can't tell you for how long or how short a time he cried. But soon there was a knock on his door. He opened the door, and in front of him stood a man dressed in a jet black cloak, a wide-brimmed hat around his head, concealing his face ever so slightly. And as the flash of lightning stretched across the skies, the seal killer saw in the background a big black stallion. Before he could gather his thoughts, the man spoke. He said, "You are the seal killer." "Yes, I am." "You need to come with me immediately. I have something for you." The seal killer was a bit reluctant. He'd never been out in this kind of weather, but there was something about the command in the man's voice and a purse by his side that seemed to be clinking. And he thought, maybe there will be a reward for all of this disaster. So he followed the man, and then he saw the horse, and the man jumped on the horse, but the seal killer looked at the man and he said, "I'm a poor man, sir. I don't have a horse. Climb on behind me," said the man, and they sped through the night. The seal killer couldn't see very well, but there in the distance, he saw a cliff, and to his horror, the horse and them seemed to be heading straight for the cliff's edge. He tried to jump off, but in that moment, a hand from the front reached out and held him tight to the horse. And in one fell swoop, the horse and the two men jumped off that cliff into the deep, deep sea. The howl of the seal killer matched the deep roar of thunder in the skies. With a splash, they fell into that deep, dark waters of the sea. And then the seal killer found the most comforting, cool waters. And most of all, he could breathe. It was amazing. It was as if air had been replaced by water and nothing had changed at all. The horse sped through those waters for a long while, and then right in front of them, they saw the turrets of a palace on the floor of the sea. And the horse sped through the waters, through the sea land, and through those green gates in front of them. They were huge. The seal killer stretched his neck to see how high they reached, but he couldn't. And before too long, they had arrived. The stallion stopped, and the strange man in the black cloak and the white-brimmed hat, jumped off that black horse and pulled the seal killer down behind him. He took the seal killer through the palace, through those beautiful, huge walls and rooms, one after the other, glinting, pearly white. The floor was made of marble, white, and fishes swam all about. But there was a sound, and it wasn't the sound of swishing waters or the fish. It was a sound of sobbing. It was the sound of many, many people sobbing. As the seal killer's eyes adjusted to this dim light of the palace, he could see huddled figures, little children, women with long black hair, and men, all brown-skinned, brown eyes, tears running down their faces. "Come on," said the man, "there's no time to lose." And the seal killer followed his guide. They went to a small room in which there was a beautiful bed, all made of cockle shells and soft seaweed, and on this lay the bull seal. It was a huge form, but a face that was moaning and groaning in pain, and the seal killer didn't need to know what was the cause, because from the back of this gigantic man, he saw his bone knife. Blood seeping out of the back of this man. "This is my father, and that is your knife," said his guide. "My father is the king of the seals, and only you can heal him." The seal killer was astounded. But more than that, he was moved. He was moved by the pain and the tears that he had encountered, and he looked without hesitation at his guide and he said, "Sir, tell me what I must do." "Pull out that knife and kiss the wound." And that's what the seal killer did. Ever so gently, he slid the knife out of its wound. And then he bent down and kissed the skin of this creature of the sea. In front of his eyes, the wound began to heal. And soon, the king of the seals was able to sit on his bed. "Seal killer, thank you. But promise me from now that you will never hunt us again." The seal killer didn't even know what he was saying, and he said, "Yes, I promise. I promise I will leave my ancestral occupation, and promise me that you will never speak about this again." "I won't." "Then we shall take care of you." And with that, the prince led the seal killer out and back onto land. And as he did, and the seal killer turned to bid him goodbye, the prince of the seals handed the seal killer a pouch and he said, "Take these with you. Don't open them till you get home. And you will always find fish whenever you go out into the sea." When the seal killer got back home that day, he opened that pouch, and out of the pouch ran on his table thousands of pearls, white from the sea, a gift of the king of the seals. It is said from that day, the seal killer never hunted again. He became a fisherman, and he passed that legacy down to his children and their children after them. And that is the story of the seal killer. So, as you can see, there's a great kind of movement between the human and the worlds of water in this part of Scotland where I come from. What I'd like to talk to you about today is, for a few minutes, just the project that I did with British Council, where water became really important as well. And this project, which was the Our Shared Cultural Heritage project, was about exploring the shared cultures and histories of the UK and South Asia. And one of the ways we found of doing this was through looking at the histories of the South Asian migrants who came to Scotland. They've been coming to Scotland since the beginning of the 20th century, and perhaps even before that. We just don't have enough documented records. But on this project, really what we did was we worked with young people between the ages of 11 and 25, primarily to experiment, to create new ways for museums and youth organizations to work together as a way for the children of the migrants, the South Asian community, and the younger generations in the South Asian community to explore their own identities, their connections with Scotland, as well as with their South Asian heritage. And it's been an amazing project. We had young people between the ages of 11 and 16 in the first instance look at their own family histories as well as histories of South Asian community members they knew about to find the various roles and identities that South Asian migrants adopted in Scotland and Glasgow predominantly. Apart from the ones that are very well known, such as South Asians coming to Scotland and taking up roles in manual work as transport workers, as factory workers. Apart from that, what else did they do? And there were so many roles and so many different identities that South Asians created for themselves. Questions of interracial marriages, questions of becoming sportsmen in the 20s and 30s. And the young people from the ages of 16 to 25 who were selected by the 11 to 15-year-olds to translate these stories into fictional accounts and create little 5-minute videos for Glasgow museums, for British Council, funded by the National Lottery. These 5-minute videos are now available, and I think the links will be put up in your chat and you could go and take a look at them. They've been entirely made by young people, conceptualized by them, mentored by myself and Oliver Braid at the Glasgow Museums, as well as with help, wonderful help from the British Council and the Manchester Museum. So with that, I will introduce to you Aisha Khan, who is a young leader on the Our Shared Cultural Heritage Project in Glasgow. She has worked as a digital intern, and currently she's planning a creative writing project as part of the OSH project. So I'll hand over to Aisha. Go ahead, Aisha.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all enjoying the event. I'm really glad to be here today, and I will first be sharing folklore based on the River Clyde, which is the most famous river in Scotland. If there was ever a most charismatic fish contest, the salmon would be a strong contender. This amazing creature is surrounded by a rich web of myth and culture in Scotland and beyond. A Scottish tale recounts how the Queen of Kidzow gave her lover the ring that had been given to her by her husband-to-be. While out hunting, the king spied the ring on a man's finger. He stealthily removed it while the man was asleep and threw it into the River Clyde, and later demanded the ring from his wife. The king then imprisoned her, promising to release her only if she could produce a ring. In desperation, the queen asked St. Mungo for help. He called upon one of his monks to catch a salmon in the river. The fish's belly was slit open, and there was a ring. St. Mungo is the patron saint of Glasgow, and a salmon appears in the city's coat of arms. The Scots associated the salmon with wisdom and power. According to Scottish mythology, the salmon provided knowledge because the salmon ate the red hazelnuts of wisdom that fell into the water of the sacred wells below the hazel trees that surrounded them. The red spots on the salmon's belly, of course, are evidence the salmon had eaten the sacred hazelnuts. The Scottish significance of salmon was that eating it would make you wise. I will now be sharing another story, which is one of the most well-known stories of Scotland, and it is the story of the Loch Ness Monster. In Scotland, a loch is another word for lake. The first sighting of a monster in the Loch Ness area was recorded in 565 AD. St. Columba, an Irish monk, was travelling through Scotland when he came across a group of people burying a man near the River Ness. When he asked what had happened, they claimed the man had tried to cross the river and was attacked by a monstrous water beast. Curious, Columba asked one of his followers to try swimming across the river. A monster approached him, but Columba stepped forward and said, "Go no further. Do not touch the man. Go back at once." The monster fled before him. There are no more recorded sightings of the monster until 1800s, but that isn't to say the monster wasn't seen. However, interest in the monster only really took off in the 1930s. In 1933, a local couple claimed to have seen the most extraordinary beast cross the road in front of their car and head into the loch. They described the beast as having a large body and a long, thin, wavy neck, slightly thicker than an elephant's trunk. They saw no limbs on the creature. Some believe that the Loch Ness Monster is the evolution of old folklore tales to keep children away from the water. Many lakes have monsters that function this way, and in Scotland there are many old tales of kelpies, which are monstrous water horses that seek to drown unsuspecting people. Thank you so much.
Hey. Great. Thank you so much, Aisha and Gauri. I think we're getting everyone back on the screen now. So this is also a time for all of you watching us to ask any questions. You can put them in the chat boxes wherever you are. But I'm going to kick off the discussion because it's been so rich and beautiful, and I think we could have spent an entire afternoon hearing more stories, listening to music, and of course seeing some of the beautiful visuals that you've shared. My question to the girls, first of all, to our young girls from the Northeast and Aisha, is how has this experience of being in this workshop or these storytelling events, or finding these stories yourself, and or how has it changed your life in any way, if it has? I mean, what has it done for you? Did you ever talk to your grandparents earlier about such stories, or just tell us a little bit about how this whole experience has been for you and how it has changed your life? Are you looking for more stories? Was it just something you did with the project and that's it? Or are you, like Gauri and Minket, wanting to continue with the art of storytelling? Any of you can speak, you just have to unmute yourselves. You're all on the screen. Yeah, sure. Cholamu.
I have been speaking Lepcha since I was a child, and I have grown up listening to Lepcha folklore. But like in those days, I never felt like I never felt connected to our ancestral narration. But after this workshop, through this workshop, it felt it was like a spiritual journey for us all, and we reflected in so many ways, like how important as a storytelling was, and how we can use this medium to protect our tales and show to the world. And this was a very spiritual journey, and now I'm learning a lot, and this is amazing. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cholamu. Hamtoma, do you want to say anything?
I don't have much to say, but I'm very glad that, like Sis Cholamu has said, I'm also very glad that through this project, I was able to connect, with the folk tales and all that comes along. And I wish to, um, always connect with my rich heritage and culture, and I would like my my generation and the what to say my future to be always connected with my culture. Thank you.
Okay. I know we've lost Lunyan. We've lost her, but Aisha, did you want to say, like, how has this changed your experience or changed your life in any way, or do you want to pursue this in some form or the other as you move on? And
this event really just helped me broaden my understanding of my own Scottish heritage and culture, and I pass by the River Clyde almost every day, but I've never really thought about the stories that come from it. And now whenever I'll go past, I'll think about what really emerged from the River Clyde and how important it really is for this generation and all the other generations that have passed.
Right. That's true. I mean, we often cross waters, we walk on a bridge, we sometimes don't see till we actually hear a story of what's actually happening. But I have a question from the audience, and I'm going to give this to Minket and Gauri because Kumria Mane has asked whether anyone has explored parallel stories from Scotland and India. Gauri, I think you've been doing that.
Shall I? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Parallel is, I guess one can think of it in different ways, but I'm definitely exploring stories from Scotland and from India. I mean, one of the themes you do find in water stories around the world is how does a creature of water relate to the creature of land and vice versa. So there's a lot that explores the relationship between the beings that live in these two very different domains. That's a motif one finds quite a bit in stories. Lots of stories around rivers and how do bodies of water come into being, so origin stories. What's fascinating in stories between Scotland and India, and putting them side by side for me, has been just how a water-rich kind of culture relates to its water bodies as different from a water-scarce region, where you really have to cajole, in a water-scarce region, you have to cajole the water out of its kind of space and place. And in the water-rich region, you have this variety of stories, like Aisha told, stories where water may not be particularly friendly.
Right.
It holds creatures that may hold dangers, or on the other hand, it may serve to mentor a relationship, like the seal killer story, where you are given certain instructions and certain blessings. So I think there's a whole kind of set of lessons and ideas there about what happens if you're in a water rich culture, what happens if you're in a water scarce culture, how do you relate to this different element. Yeah,
That's an important point, I think. The scarcity that drives the way we look at water, and then when you have water-rich environments, but you also have floods, and you have people thinking about the floods and how they remember floods in so many parts of the world, and 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 I think often when we talk about conservation of water, or when we look at climate change and what's happening to water resources, we don't bring in the stories, we bring in the science, we bring in the policy, we bring in other aspects of how we look at water and how we want to, think about sustainability. But I'm also beginning to think, where do stories come into this? How do we use stories to make people not just think about their past, but to, like the seal hunter, change practices, or look at behavioral change. Minket, this is for you. Like, how, because you've been doing this for quite some time as well, and with your film on the Tista and things like that, do you think that storytelling has a way of impacting behavioral change, for example? I mean, or maybe that's, Minket, can you hear us?
I think, could you repeat again? Could you repeat it?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Minket, that you've been doing storytelling for some time, and you've also made a film and so forth. And I wanted to know that, well, let me ask you this question from Nikki Black. All right. Yeah. Have any of you found stories that illustrate changes to water use over time through the impact of climate change, population demands, etc.? Well, the question sort of flipped around a little bit, like asking you whether you found stories, and I was asking you whether you found through the films and the storytelling events, whether does it lead to any change in people's behavior? For example, even coming back to the girls and the project.
Right. I think it's just a way of looking at the way we kind of understand climate change, and or for that matter, even the kind of developmentals that we have been having around. It's just a detachment that we have with our that kind of pretty much talks about our storytelling, because I think the stories were always around. The stories were always in the form of the craft or the art or even rituals or even dance, like I mentioned before. But somehow when we kind of get into the education system, which does not cater to this, and we spend quite a lot of our time trying to kind of deconstruct whatever our have been doing for such a long time, then you start looking at the same thing which we are about in a very, very different way, questioning our practices, we start questioning our stories, we start looking at science and the logic in the stories. But most of these stories have a lot of wisdom, which might not have a logic. So I think the storytelling was always there. It is us who got detached with the whole idea of even connecting. And I think why we talk about this, like we talk about this climate is always happening it's always changing, but it's the rapid change that has happened of our own mental practice that we can see out there in our faces. And the scientific dialogue and the narrative that creates does cater to the logical sense of answering probably some aspects. But I think since we are people who are kind of dependent on the climate and around it, right, from the rivers to the mountains, community and the knowledge system that we always had with our elders, I think that is what storytelling is about, and that's how we are trying to address it through this project also. And like Chola talked about how it was very spiritual, right, the journey. So I think like we always talk about the e-flow, the the initial flow and the very scientific terms towards the river. But I our very famous water expert Dr. Deepak the spiritual flow. The spiritual flow is what storytelling is about, and that's what we need to practice. So that's what I feel, and I think me kind of talking using the medium of storytelling is because I think it's a very community driven practice where a verbal storytelling connects from human to human, heart to heart, and just being humanity to humanity, keeping aside even the films or even the research papers or the books. It's just two people sitting together and talking. I think that's practice as a community that we need to bring about. And I think the climate change will be felt at a deeper level than just the intellectual conversations. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you,
For your
Minket.
question.
Did anyone else want to add to that? Because I think when we look at water, and we're now looking at a new kind of water ethics, something that we don't often talk about is culture, is storytelling, is the role of women. All these things come together in this very powerful afternoon that we've been sharing over here. And I think, Gauri, there's a question for you as well. One more. What about women's empowerment in water and feminist stories around water? I think
Yeah.
many.
Yes, I do get asked questions around feminism. For a lot of cultures, water has always had qualities that were associated more with the feminine. A lot of your river stories,
Yeah.
a lot of water body based stories, water stories have women as quite a central figure. So the seal killer story that I told you right now, the shorter version is what I told you right now. And that has the seal king who is wounded and injured. There is a longer version of the story which has a seal queen who needs to be restored and healed. So there's something quite powerful in the imaginings around water. I think what happens with there's something that Minket touched on, which I'd like to elaborate a little bit to answer this question. Feminism is quite a new movement, right? As an ideological movement. It begins it's a 20th century movement. Stories have been around for way longer than that. Now, the way stories look at the masculine and feminine is not exactly the way kind of we interpret feminine and the masculine right now. So stories have always centered around what happens when there is an imbalance between the power of the feminine and the power of the masculine. a lot of stories, the plot points, especially around water, happens when one or the other energy takes over. And many of these stories talk about how redressal can be addressed, how it is vitally important for these energies to be in balance. So I would say there's something very, if you want to call it feminist, right at the heart of a lot of these old stories, because they are about redressing balances. And for many of these stories, it's about the feminine falling into kind of out of kilter, just because of the way our the histories of human civilizations have moved. So I don't think there's any I, you know, sometimes I feel like with storytelling, we don't need to redress anything. We just need to stay with what the story is trying to tell us. And the deeper you move into the layers of the story, the deeper you uncover these wisdoms that stories are always telling you. It's how we tell the stories and not what we need to recover from the stories that is
Right.
important, increasingly. Yeah. I hope that answers the question in some way.
Thank you. Thanks, Gauri. No, I think it does. I mean, it is both. I think it's the recitation of the story, the content, what you pull out of it, and so forth. But I want to take the conversation back to the young women, the young girls over here. And I want to ask you, Linyan and Cholama and Hamtona, what kind of changes have you seen around your own homes with water? And how does water come to your homes? How does water come to your house? Do you, as young girls, have to spend time fetching water? Is that something that you do? Just want to know a little bit about your everyday lives around water. Would one of you like to start? And then I'd like Aisha to share a little bit about your everyday life around water, but I'm sure it's not in the same way, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
Minket, maybe you may want to help the girls a little bit.
Yeah, I think let's begin with Linyam, since we have not heard from her and we lost her. Would be really nice to hear from you, Linyam, and just address Sarah's question, and probably quickly also talk about your journey with the Living Waters exhibition too, because you couldn't answer that. Could you? Yes.
Okay, sure. I've had the privilege
Can
of
you
Just a
growing
little
up in the
louder.
city. So,
Can you speak up a little bit, Linya?
hello, is this fine?
A little more louder.
Hello?
Yeah, just put the mic on.
Is
Yeah. Mm. Yes. Go ahead.
this fine? Well, I've had the privilege of growing up in the city, but my mother often tells
Fine.
me
Just go ahead.
stories about
Just speak louder.
how
Yeah.
they had to fetch water from the streams. And the thing is, my mother's village, there's actually no large water bodies there, no big rivers, no big ponds, nothing of that sort. And even today, if some kind of like big fire happens, then 90 to 80%, 80 to 90% chances that the village is going to burn entirely. It happened recently, actually. There's no proper water source there. So all the villagers could do is watch and run and save their lives. Even today, there's just too many water problems in my mother's village. I've had the privilege of growing up in the city, but
Mm-hmm.
even when I go there during vacations, I see these young girls my age, younger than me, smaller than me. They carry these huge buckets of water. They go down to the mountains and rivers, and they just don't have a choice. And often it hampers in their education, because it takes so much time to collect water and stuff like that. And this the the water museum has been a great opportunity for me to learn the kind of privileges I have had, because if I had grown up in my mother's village, then I wouldn't be able to comfortably study or live. For even for the smallest of the resources, I would have to do very hard work. lot of manual labor and hard work.
Okay.
I suffered
Thank
like
you.
water. So when I had the chance of participating in the water museum, I was really grateful, and yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Lilian.
Linyam. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those wonderful words. So now over to Hamthoma. Yes. Hamthoma, could you just answer with regards to the water body here at your home? What is your relationship?
Um, since I'm not living in the village, I would like to say that I'm very fortunate. I mean, I would personally say that I'm very fortunate that I'm not needing to go to the river or well for fetching water. But if we look back at our villages, there are a lot of people who are still facing the scarcity of water. In some very remote areas, there are many villagers who don't get proper water. They need to drink the dirty water. So I feel like it should be changed. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cholamo, do you want to say anything?
Yes.
Cholamu.
We have had few springs, like where we would go and fetch waters, but now because of like population growth and people settling in and the construction and building of roads has caused, it has created a very major impact on the small springs, and now it is completely off, and now we only have like one spring remaining. And climate change is rapid and we are facing it like every day, and the landslides, the daily raining and everything has caused major problem. Like we cannot go to like the source of where we get the water because of the landslides, and it is very difficult.
Yeah, a lot of the mountain springs in the northeast, in fact, across the Himalaya, with the kind of development that's happening, and particularly around infrastructure development, it is affecting springs. I think Sikkim and some of the states and other parts there's work going on reviving some of these mountain springs as well. So that's the nice part, the good part of it, that people are thinking about where their water sources are and what can we do about them. But Aisha, I wanted to ask you, because I'm not sure how many generations back your family came to live in Scotland, but did you ever hear any stories from your grandparents about any of the hardships they faced around, fetching water or getting water to their homes? Wherever they lived earlier?
Yeah, I've heard of stories of how difficult it used to be, and even now I know it can be really difficult in Pakistan, where my family come from. When I visit, sometimes the water just finishes, or it's only available for 1 or 2 hours in the day, and the water there is quite dirty. It's not pure to drink straight out of the tap like it is here. So even having to buy bottled water there is expensive, and it's sad how only the most fortunate people can afford like a basic necessity, drinking water. And I think that's something that people here in Scotland and the UK really take advantage of. They don't realize how lucky they are to have like such nice, like pure water available for them to drink straight away. Even in Pakistan, people just have to store like water in buckets and pots and pans for them to use throughout the day. And it really just has made me realize how lucky I am and how like privileged I am to be able to have such easy access to water compared to my family in Pakistan.
Okay, that's whereabouts is home in Pakistan?
In Karachi.
In Karachi. Never been there, but to other places, yes, but very similar issues and challenges across South Asia, Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and other countries as well. So we see similar issues in many parts, and many of our rivers are transboundary as well, and that also connects people and their stories and their livelihoods. I am wondering whether if there are no more questions from the audience, or if any of you would like to ask any questions of each other in the group, if anyone wants to ask a question. Otherwise, I will, on behalf of the Living Waters Museum, thank you again for all the work that you did for this project, Minket and the team, and of course Gauri for stuff that you've done with us earlier as well, but for being together in this program, and for bringing voices from the Northeast and from Scotland and together, and to thank you, Aisha, for your insights. And I love salmon, so I was very happy to hear the salmon story and the Loch Ness one as well. I've been there and tried to find the Loch Ness monster once myself many years ago. But I'm going to hand it back now to the British Council hosts. And thank you very much, all of you. It was a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for moderating, and thanks everyone who joined us. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this session, and just to say that you don't see the back end, but there's so much gratefulness and love that all the women were sharing with each other in the back end, supporting, and so much humbleness and, like I said, gratefulness there. That was really sweet to see, because that's the reality. Although we're doing this event for South Asian Heritage Month, the lead up to it of, even doing tech checks together and, being together and giving confidence to young women to be able to, to want to speak about their stories is something that this is really about. So thank you so much, Aisha, Chalamo, Hamthama, and Linyam, for joining us. You're amazing young people who are going to be telling and driving the stories forward for the future. And it's been a privilege actually for us to be with you and hear what you think about these things. And you did so well. Like, your stories were incredible, and we're so proud of you. Sarah, thank you so much. Gauri and Minket, you are incredible because you brought so many voices together. Gauri, I loved that you were talking about how these stories are beyond words. There's oral histories. You talked about, the cross-stitch story, which, the image for the Eventbrite showed, which was beautiful. Linyam, your story was really beautiful, and the fact that you did the illustrations and you talked a lot about tribal culture, which I think we really want to bring forward. Hamthama, what an amazing song. I could listen to you all day, I think. Just such a beautiful voice, and so authentic, and I really hope you continue with that. It's such a beautiful mode to share stories. And Chalamo, you spoke so much about this being a spiritual journey, and I think you guys all took us on a spiritual journey, which was amazing. You talked about language and heritage, how some of these things are not just about storytelling about what happened in the past or the future, but even losing, our language and translation is so important, and to protect our histories, which I thought was such a strong message to send to people. And yeah, one more, just, Aisha on the salmon, and bring it back into the context of Scotland is incredible to show us how in the UK, what our relationship with water is, and the lochs, a really powerful story as well. And I know we talked about the role of women, and we've managed to gather like all these women, which I'm really grateful for, because actually women play a huge role. They're some of the worst sufferers amongst climate change migrants, and the role of women from water carrying. I think a lot of people mentioned just actually casually we would have to get water from streams, but that's such a powerful role to carry water around sustenance and how important water culture is. I mean, I could go on about this, but just to say that I think this is a really important topic, and the way you carried it was beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone who attended. We hope to do more around this topic, around the Ashed Cultural Heritage Programme. So please follow us, follow our programme. It's on the British Council website, also Manchester Museum. Also follow Living Waters Museum to follow this project more. So we'll wrap up now, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.